I haven't even said anything yet. You don't know. Welcome, or I guess you've been here for probably a really long time at this point, so maybe welcome doesn't quite apply, but as Michelle said, I am going to be talking about some topics today that are tough and maybe triggering for survivors of sexual violence. That said, I'm a survivor, and Beyonce also is a survivor. And so I'm going to be, everything I wrote in this talk is for survivors and is for me, and I'm really hoping that nothing will trigger anything that's too much for anyone in the audience, but if it is, please feel free to leave. I won't be offended. So today, I'm talking about sexual violence. I'm using that term, and the way that I have defined sexual violence is as a system of oppression that makes people feel vulnerable about their connection to their body. And that system affects people in many different ways, and a lot of them are, physical, what you would think of when you think of sexual violence, like catcalling or assault or rape. And sexual violence can affect all kinds of people, all genders, all ages, all races, all ability levels, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to acknowledge that and just give you a background that that's what I'm talking about when I say sexual violence. And we're going to do a little poll together. It's actually really exciting. You guys get to join me in some original research right now. So how this is going to work is take out your phones. I know we told you to turn them off. Please turn them back on. I'm going to give you a second to do that. And Daniel, if he's around, is hopefully going to get the poll on the screen. Okay, here we go. So how this works is, this is a question that is there for all of you. Have you ever experienced sexual language or sexual touching that made you uncomfortable? And how this works is you're going to text to the number 22333. You're going to text your answer, and your answer will correspond to one of the three codes. So if you say yes, text 599383 to the number 22333. It's a lot of numbers. Hopefully you can say it with me. If your answer is no, someone's already doing it. Yeah, so it should show up real time. So if your answer is no, 599384 to the number 22333. And then if your answer is not sure, it's complicated, you can text 599385 to the number 22333. I'm going to give you guys a minute, and let's just watch these results together. So you can keep texting them in if you're still thinking about it. But clearly, we already have some pretty striking results. 33 people have said yes, they have experienced sexual language or touching that made them feel uncomfortable. And 7 have said no. And 2 have said they don't really know, or it's complicated. Those are pretty big numbers. Let's go to the next question. Have you or has a friend of yours experienced sexual assault or rape? So it's the same deal. You're texting the same number, which is 22333, and here are the 3 different codes. Wow. 35 of the people in this audience have been affected by this in a very personal way. Either they have experienced sexual assault or rape, or they know a friend who has experienced sexual assault or rape. 5 people say they don't. I don't know if I believe you yet, but that's okay, because I think some of your friends probably have. And 2 of you said you're not sure. This is probably one of the most ubiquitous forms of violence facing our community today. And yet, how often are we talking about it? And also, whose voices are being amplified when we do talk about it? Let's talk about TED for a second. TED was organized as a conference about technology, and so I wasn't surprised. I was thinking that it was likely that the majority of TED Talks would be about technology in some form. So I did a little search. I was wondering how that compared to the amount of talks on sexual violence. So I did a search, and when I searched the TED website for technology, there were 24,000 responses, videos and various things. When I searched for sexual violence, there were 22 answers. Not 22,000, but 22. What does this tell us about ideas worth sharing? Whose voices are worth sharing? Let's look at some history for a second. I really like talking about the Montgomery bus boycott. I think it's really interesting to think about how that movement developed. The majority of people in this room have probably heard about the bus boycott, and yet they probably have heard about it as a movement that MLK was the leader of and really brought the energy, and yet in reality the movement was built by women. This is a movement that grew out of women who were tired of segregation on the buses, but most importantly, they were traveling from their black neighborhoods all the way across town to white suburbs to do cleaning work, housework all day, and then traveling back at night, and they were mistreated on the buses. They would get on the bus and pay their fare and then get off and have to go back to the back door, and the driver would drive away with their fare. Or, various other forms of abuse. The drivers actually had guns that they could use to enforce whatever they felt was what needed to be enforced, and these were all white bus drivers. So the women were fed up, and they came together and they said, we're going to change this. They started refusing to move to the back of the bus. Many women, including Rosa Parks, refused to move to the back of the bus. And then one day, Rosa Parks did that, and it became the crux of the movement in a way. People decided that she was respectable enough to be the image of someone who was using civil disobedience in that way. And yet, Rosa Parks was not a tired old lady like we often talk about her as. She was an activist. She was fiery. She worked for the NAACP, and she was actually an investigator on cases of sexual assault against black women perpetrated by white men. It's easier to see Rosa Parks as passive, to see her move of activism as her being tired. She couldn't stand up anymore. It's easier to think of all of the women who built this movement as passive people, and see Martin Luther King as this incredible agential leader who, he obviously did many great things for the civil rights movement, and I don't discount that, but there's actually a quote by Ella Baker, one of the women who was huge in the civil rights movement, and she said, "Martin didn't make the movement made Martin." The women pulling the strings behind the scenes knew very well that they wouldn't be received the same way as Martin Luther King would be if they got up to speak in that time. I actually was learning about this whole issue in class and the other day, and my professor asked, why do you think that these women asked Martin Luther King to stand up for them and speak for them? And this white boy in my class said, I think that those women were probably nervous. They probably were not confident enough to speak for themselves. And I raised my eyebrows so high that I thought they would get stuck. The women knew exactly what they were doing. It was a very intentional move. And women like Ella Baker and Joanne Robinson made that choice because they knew that if they spoke up, people would not consider their ideas worth sharing. I didn't think that my stories of sexual violence were ideas worth sharing for a long time. That's how sexual violence goes unchecked. It depends on the silence and the isolation of survivors. So this is going to be really tough to talk about for me and tough for you guys to hear. So it needs to be done. Let's rip off the Band-Aid together. Hopefully my eyes don't get too blurry to look at my notes. So I'm fed up. I'm fed up with the constant barrage of messages reinforcing the notion that sexual violence should be a topic left out of the public sphere. And I'm tired of people thinking that when it is time to finally talk about these issues, it should be a man doing it. We should look to our male allies, people like Cody, people who have not experienced sexual assault and are solely allies. We should look at them as we look at the words of Martin Luther King Jr. as words from the lips of a great man that were inspired by the heart and intellect of many women. I'm angry that the moment I finally decided to speak up in a public forum, a well-meaning person who I feel so much love from now, but this person edited my talk description without my consent and told the entire campus that I would be talking about sexual assault, is an extremely vulnerable thing to share, and an announce email is not the venue that I was hoping to do that. I'm angry that I apologized, that I was upset by that, because I've been trained to think that I have to be nice and that I can't really get mad about things, that I shouldn't be angry that my story of sexual assault was stolen from me and pushed into the inbox of my very assaulters. I'm mad that the thing that finally pushed me to speak today was rape by a stranger, because I had been taught that only then would my experiences be received, be listened to. When the reality is, I have had non-consensual sex far too many times, and only one of them was with a stranger. In each of those moments, I did not recognize that I had any other option, because as far as I was concerned, if I was not a white male, my opinion did not matter. That's the message I've been taught. That's the message that has been reinforced throughout my life. I've been taught that these things are somehow my fault, when in reality, to quote a close friend of mine, Shauna Wallace, it is never the fault of the person who is experiencing sexual violence, ever. It's just not. I'm mad that the first thing I thought of when I heard that I was definitely giving this talk was, what am I going to wear? Because if I wore the dress I really wanted to wear, which was this black, sort of slimming, tight-fitting dress, but still professional, I was worried that people would then think, oh, well, if she can wear that, then of course it would happen. You know, of course she'd be raped or taken advantage of. For the record, I've only ever been raped by white men. That doesn't mean that other races can't rape or other genders can't rape or white men can't be raped. It means that I have experienced firsthand the violence attached to telling white men that they are entitled to other people's bodies. Thanks. I'm going to read you a letter now I wrote to someone I call generic white man. He is a combination of all of the men who have hurt me, and it's not intended to shame anyone. It's really not, although it might bring to light some of the subtleties behind interactions that some potential perpetrators in the audience have had with people that they didn't realize were kind of messed up. Really, it's intended for me, and it's intended for survivors, to feel a sense of community, and maybe some of the things I say will resonate. Maybe they're even very similar to things that you have experienced. So here we go. Dear generic white man, when I was 17 and we broke up, you tried to get me to write a Facebook status telling everyone that I'm a slut because I no longer loved you. When I was 19, you grabbed my chest at a dance and then got upset when I walked away. I imagine you thinking, but I was using those. Then there was that time we were hooking up and you put your body inside of mine without warning, without checking in, and without protection. That time you did that on 4 separate occasions. The last time it happened, I immediately pushed you off of me and you ejaculated all over me. You made me feel like my body didn't belong to me. When I was 21, I thought we were friends. Your roommate wasn't on campus and all the rest of my friends were in the house. So it made sense to sleep in the empty bed, especially considering the potential dangers of walking alone in the middle of the night all the way across campus. I thought I was safe, but you forced me with your words to think that the fact that I had blatantly told you multiple times that I was not interested in you like that meant nothing. When we talked about it afterwards, you said you didn't think it was true that you had power in that situation just because your body protruded and mine could be intruded. Now I realize you're right. it wasn't just because of that. It was not only because you have been taught that you are entitled to all, oh holy generic white man, but also that it has been so ingrained in your mind that you can't even see it. It's not just bodies you feel entitled to. It's space. You take up so much room on the subway that there's an entire tumbler dedicated to it. It's language. You guys is considered gender neutral because masculinity is the standard and everything else is other. It's political power. A few days ago, South Carolina's Tim Scott became the first black senator in South Carolina since Reconstruction. And don't even get me started on how few members of Congress are women. Generic white man, there was one time when you hurt me in a much more lasting way than I ever imagined would have happened to me. When I was younger and I heard statistics that 1 in 4 women would be raped in their life, I thought, oh yeah, but that's the other women. That was not true. I was very wrong. This August, you raped me. This time it was different than the others. This time after I threw you off me, I was sobbing on the floor, but then somehow ended up back in bed under you again. You hurt more than just my body and my sense of worth. You ripped my entire identity entirely away from me so that I didn't know which way was up. A few weeks later, I was lost, trying to think of a single thing that I knew for sure about myself. It took me 10 minutes to think of anything. I went on to shave my head to regain a sense of control over my body, and I listened to loud music to drown out the memory of you telling me I was sexy like it was a compliment. I sipped hot tea, hoping that the smoke tendrils would enter my lungs as I breathed in and ease any lingering suggestions of your scent. Erase all lingering suggestions. You traumatized me, but I have to believe that you didn't know any better. I have to believe that those things you did were out of a place of ignorance, because I have high hopes for you, generic white man. I think you can do better. I could sit here and blame all of the individual men who hurt me, but in reality that's pointless, because it's the system that's flawed. It's the entire system. When I chose the definition of sexual violence like I did for a reason, I'm going to repeat it. The system of oppression that makes people feel vulnerable about their connection to their body. That manifests in so many ways, but one of the most important ways is the gender binary. The fact that we tell men, this is how you behave. We tell women, this is how you behave. And we tell them, that's because of your genitals. Who came up with that? Can I talk to whoever came up with that? And can we talk about that? Because I just don't think that's right. Gender is so much more complicated than that. There are so many people who do not fit into those binaries, and there are so many people who wouldn't fit into them if they didn't think they had to. And that entire system is what makes people act the way they do. It's why I felt like I wasn't entitled to my body, and it's why generic white man felt like he was. We need to address the entire gender binary if we're going to stop sexual violence. Because sexual violence makes people feel uncomfortable in their own bodies. It makes them feel like it's not okay to be who they are, that their identity has to be a certain thing in order for it to match up with their bodies, and that's just not true. So many men in my life give me hope. Hope that we can change things. Hope that people are willing to engage with these issues. People like Cody, who spoke before me, who are really actively trying to dismantle the systems that put them ahead for no reason. So for the men in my life who care about me, I just want to say that you can't empower me unless you give up your power over me. Stop interrupting me. Stop taking credit for my ideas. Stop paying me less than my male coworkers. Stop thinking that my body is yours for the taking. Stop calling me a bitch, and please stop raping me. Instead, start asking how you can be better, how you can be more informed, how you can work to invert the violent power structures that hurt so many people. Now it's up to you, TED listeners and viewers. What do you think are the things that I have shared tonight ideas worth sharing?